Welcome you all. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you the speaker of today's translation seminar, Professor Masaru Yamada, who's not to be mistaken, with the Olympian fencer with the same name. But Professor Yamada is no less a star in the field of translation and interpreting studies in Japan. Professor Yamada is currently working as a professor at the College of Graduate School of Intercultural Communications at Rikkyo University in Japan. He was originally trained as a linguist, but he also has reached real-life practical experience in project management. In the field, he is known as a scholar who specializes in studying the process of translation, moving away from the more traditional approach of studying the product of translation. And to study the translation process, he's also known for incorporating the use of technologies, and more so, he is doing quite a bit of research in this aspect. So in a broader sense, we can say that his research interests lie in the human-computer interaction, which is very, very exciting. You have all read Professor Yamada's abstract, and we saw that he starts with a pretty common view that how people in our field and the field of language education see machine translations as a threat. It seems like even studying another language is put into question, but you will hear that Professor Yamada is going to offer some hope, with the support of the research evidence, including his own research. And so he will also talk about, his experience and also research in using machine translation in language teaching. I must say that, I really feel excited about this topic because my training at the PhD program was foreign language education, even though my own research has been has moved away from foreign language education. But like I told him, this topic is considered quite rare among the translation seminars that the Center for Translation has held. So I feel that this is such a welcome change of topic, and the topic of his talk is machine translation in language teaching. So now I bring you Professor Masaru Yamada.
Okay. Minha, thank you for a very kind introduction on me. And as introduced, my name is Masaru Yamada from Rikkyo University. And I will give my talk on machine translation in language teaching today. But to tell you the truth, I got invited by so many talk in the past 6 months. Like in Japan, at least I think I presented like close to like 5 times or 6 times on this topic. Then also in English, I recently gave the similar presentation a couple of weeks ago. So if you are a fan of me, maybe you've heard my presentation somewhere, before. But that's the only excuse. Okay, so I will share my screen and get started. Okay, so the title is I want to call this. I want to disseminate this new title, MTILT, which is machine translation in language teaching, and I will talk about this topic today. To begin with, probably you don't need my self-introduction, but I will briefly give you who I am. Like I said, my name is Masaru. My last name is disappeared. My name is Masaru Yamada. I'm right now in Rikkyo University, Tokyo, Japan. And I did my master's in linguistics / TESOL. So my master's was actually teaching English, which relates to the topic that I will give today. And I worked as a in-house translator for the time being in my 30s. And to the late 30s, I decided to go back to study because I was in a translator, interpreter. So I wanted to study more about my profession. So I decided to move on to a PhD program in Rikkyo University. And I finished my PhD close to my 40s. That's how I am. So I am a little unusual in terms of the fact that I'm not a fully researcher, but I'm a practitioner as well. So I'm like you want to call like a practi researcher in a sense. But right now, yes, my research interest is on translation process research. And then also I do a lot of research on translation technologies and the translators' interaction with those technologies. But the topic today is the machine translation and English education. And like as I said, this topic is very exciting in Japan right now because the English education is the compulsory in Japan, and a lot of English teachers feel scared or fear because they might lose their job in the future in the presence of this machine translation technologies. So this topic was very hot in the past couple of years. Then I appeared some TV shows and and that stuff. So that's the screenshot from that. But also I am engaged in developing a translation tool. It's one of the kind of CAT tools. It's called the Rakuten. So this has to do with my the research I do, and then also, well, anyway, something like that. Okay, we'll move on. Okay, so I will start my the real talk. So if you think about it, the translation training and foreign language learning has a lot of common between, but the need for foreign language education is changing, not only Japan, but also the worldwide. Especially here, the quote in 2012, the former president of the Harvard University made headlines when he said the following. So I just read this one. Notably in January, he commented, the English emergence as the global language, along with the rapid progress in machine translation, make it less clear that substantial investment necessary to speak a foreign tongue is universally worthwhile. So when Lawrence Summers made this comment, this has a great impact on the situations with the English teachers worldwide. But also from translation studies side, the Miguel made the comments. The translation technologies are here to stay. Therefore, their pedagogy and practical implementation in teaching translation, or generally in any foreign language learning, must be critically reconsidered in the 21st century. So this is another thing. I mean, we cannot ignore the presence of translation technology or machine translation when we think about any kinds of language-related training. So given that, so my agenda today is the first half, I will talk about machine translation, foreign language learning, and translation training. Then I wanna shift my the topic from like TILT translation in language teaching to machine translation in language teaching. So the first half, I will give you a little bit of a background of the Japanese English education. And also I will provide the explanation about TILT and MTILT. And the second half of my presentation, I will provide some research experiment result, which we conducted in the past couple months. So first, machine translation in English education in Japan. English education in Japan starts actually in elementary school. So it's almost a mandatory subject until the end of college. So everyone has to take the English classes. And actually it will start at the third or the fourth graders, and the fifth and sixth graders also, they have to learn English. So it becomes a subject called foreign language class. Now, as I said, English education is almost compulsory, and it continues until the graduation of university. But you know that English education in Japan is not really successful. Let's look at some of the things that the Japanese government do for English educations, and also the foreign language situations. The Ministry of Education, their education plan aims at like the 50% of junior high graduates with say for A level. So they are aiming the junior high school graduate to acquire A1, say for R, A1 level of English. But also they are aiming the 50% of high school graduate with A2 level. So that's their aim. Then also the Japanese education ministry tried to increase the number of Japanese high school students studying abroad to 60,000. And also they want to send the university students to study abroad to like 120,000. So, I mean, recently, a lot of Japanese people tend to stay inside Japan. They don't want to go study abroad. So actually, the government is encouraging more people to go study abroad. So that's the kind of aim. But on the other hand, the global communication plan is also the plan by the Japanese government. This is not a education, Ministry of Education, but other sector of government. So it's called the Global Communication Plan 2025. It started actually in 2014, and it continued until 2019. That's the first term. But they started the second term to aim for the Expo in Osaka 2025. So what they're doing is that their mission is to eliminate the world language barriers by developing machine interpreting. And that can do not only the consecutive interpretation, but also the simultaneous interpreting. And they want the technology to be implemented in the society. So basically for 2025, they want to use this technology to welcome inbound tourism for the Japan Expo in Osaka. Their milestone is, the first time in 2020, they developed this machine translation technologies that supports everyday life conversations. Actually, this was their intention was for the Olympic game in 2020. So that was finished. So from their perspective, machine translation is already successful. So now they want to develop this machine interpreting technology that complements like the context and then also the speaker's intention. Not only the text-to-text speech, but also the device can understand the kind of context in the conversation or the talk. And also their final goal is 2030, they want to develop the machine interpreting that can be used for the real negotiation in business and government talks and blah, blah, blah. So that's their ambitions. So when you think about those two things done by the Japanese government, one is that has to do with the English educations. But on the other hand, some other sections in Japan are trying to develop this kind of technologies. So Ministry of Education says the machine translate, actually, I'm sorry, the machine translation's English competence, if you want to call, it is now almost equivalent to CFR C1 level or higher when it comes to reading or writing. But also, if machine interpreting is put into practical use, listening and speaking skill may also surpass C1 level. So do you see this contradictory here? That on one hand, Ministry of Education tried to foster those people who can acquire the CFR A1 or A2 level of English skills, but actually those technology already exceeds that levels. Then a lot of people come up with this question: is it really necessary to study English, especially in the Japanese context? I will show you more detail how that technology really exceeds the English competence of most of the English speakers in Japan. After 2016, 2016 is the time when the neural machine translation was introduced, as you know. And that was the great improvement from the previous technology called statistical machine translations. So if you look at the quality improvement in detail, before 2016, this is my my own subject rating of this score, but accuracy in translation was 60 points back then. But after 2016, the new NMT, the neural machine translation, got reached like 75 points. But if you look at the fluency that generated by the NMT, it's much higher. It's more like the NMT can generate native-like sentences, but the consistency is not as good. One research result says that the result of neural machine translation outputs are manually evaluated for this experiment. For accuracy, compared with the translation done by Japanese businessman who has the TOEFL 200 scores. And also the NMT output was compared with Japanese professional translators. So for this experiment, they use some excerpt from business text and also the economic news. As you see, the accuracy and the fluency of machine translation is almost equal to those of the professional translators, surpassing every businessman with a TOEIC score of 960. So as you see, this blue score, blue bar is accuracy. The NMT got a 4.45, which is almost equal to the professional two translators. Human translator A got a 4.44, and etc. And the fluency on the red bar is also almost nearly equal to professional translators. So if you want to see, this is from the translation from Japanese to English. So this is kind of, you can interpret as a writing skill of machine translation. So this exceeds most of those businessmen with TOEIC 960 or so. By the way, this is the comparative tables. So C1, the CFR C1 is a TOEIC like 945, 990. But reading ability, or the ability to translate from English to Japanese, is not as high as the writing, but still neural machine translation score exceeds all business persons' performance, as you see, in terms of both accuracy and fluency. So this is kind of interesting because into English got scored higher than into Japanese. This has something to do with the perception of, I mean, I think the evaluators are Japanese or something, but anyway, but either way, still NMT outperforms almost all those businessmen. So this is actual examples from Japanese to English translations. The top one, this one is a machine translations result, and the bottom one is the professional translators translation into English. I visited your booth at the medical equipment fair in Copenhagen last month. And the professional translators translation from this Japanese is, we visited your booth at the medical equipment fair in Copenhagen last month. You don't really see the difference, but I guess the difference is the medical equipment fair was the first letter was capitalized because this was a proper noun or something. But that's the only difference we can actually recognize between machine translation output and the professional human translation output. Another evidence, 1 year ago, we conducted a survey of English teachers, about 60 Japanese English teachers teaches English at the universities, to find out what those teachers think about machine translation and its use in classroom. And one of the questions in our survey asked this question. So how do you position the current English proficiency of machine translation compared to that of your students? And not surprisingly or surprisingly, more than 70% of those English instructors said machine translation is better than students. So the teachers are not really motivated to teach. I don't know if you want to interpret this result, while some students may not be motivated to learn English either, right? So this is the reality of the Japanese classroom. And in this questionnaire, however, we also ask one question. So would you like to use machine translation for English teaching? And more than half of the response answered yes. So a lot of English teachers are very interested in making the best use of machine translation in the classroom. So we can assume that they want to know how to use it. And that actually motivates me to pursue this topic. Okay, so given all those information, so do you really think it's really necessary to study English or the foreign language? Maybe we can say maybe two opinions can be assumed. The first one is maybe some media says, don't bother learning a foreign language. So that's the answer, right? So it is not necessary to learn foreign language anymore because we have access to the very high quality machine translation. That's one answer. But this idea do not seem to be shared by the majority of academic researchers and educators. Neural machine translation, or this technology, is perceived as another potentially useful tool for language learning, rather than a threat to the learning of a foreign language. So I want to take the second opinion, and then I want to proceed with my presentation for the rest. So 2060, as I mentioned, is a very important year. This is the year, as I said, the neural machine translation was put to practical use. Specifically, the Google Translate engine switched to neural machine translation and started being used for English and Japanese combination. So since then, there's a lot of research has been conducted on the use of MT in language learning. And then this year, Klimova and others published this article, and they conducted a systemic review on researches published after 2016, and that investigate the utility of the use of neural machine translation for foreign language teaching. And they went through the very strict screening of those papers for their review, and only 13 papers are selected, and they carefully review those papers. And in fact, my own 2019 post-editing paper was selected for their review. I'm just saying it. But anyway, so according to this systemic review result, these are some of the summary here. So there is no doubt that the use of MT is effective in teaching English. While using MT, students with lower English proficiency can develop their vocabulary and enhance their writing skills. MT allows learners to acquire vocabulary and expressions they would not be able to come across on their own. So that's a good thing. However, it is ideal for experienced teachers to provide a certain level of support and for students to peer review each other's work. And students with higher proficiency can improve their metalinguistic awareness of the language differences between their L1 and L2. So this paper actually summarizes it, and you now see that, okay, maybe it's good to use MT in teaching foreign language, but we still do not know how to utilize MT in a concrete terms, right? So that is why in my presentation, I will propose a solution to this. That's why I will introduce machine translation in language teaching. But before that, you need to know the difference between translation, foreign language learning, and also the TILT, translation in language teaching. Then also you want to know the difference between that and translation training or the translator training. Just a little bit of historical background of foreign language learning. Some of you guys already know this, but I'm just gonna go over this. Translation is not really popular in the current foreign language learning. But if you think about it, the translation is considered to be the oldest method of teaching foreign languages, which was widely used for centuries as a classical method of teaching like Greek or the Latin. The same approach later established itself as teaching modern languages, so-called grammar translation method. And the methodology, or the method, was introduced in the secondary school in Prussia at the end of the 18th century. So grammar translation method. However, this approach, or the approach toward the grammar translation method and the use of L1 in the classroom was brought into questions, and consequently criticized along with the development of new language teaching methods known as natural methods or the direct methods or the communicative approach. So those changes were introduced along with the reform movement of the 19th century based on the new assumption of language learning, which included the primacy of speech with an emphasis of speaking and listening skills. A renewed interest in translation as part of the language classroom practice begun by Duff was based on a shift from emphasis from learning translation as an aim in itself to use translation as a means to promote language learning. So those ideas actually came from like translation studies scholars, but also from the foreign language learning the field. Another author contributing the reconsideration of translation in language teaching was Guy Cook, and he presented in his book, Translation in Language Teaching. a view of translation as an aid, not only to language acquisition, pedagogy, and testing, but also a response to students' need, rights, and the tool of empowerment. So the translation studies originally, or they used to believe the translator training and the foreign language education are completely two different things. But because the having excellent foreign language skill is the minimum requirement to become a translator. But given those the movements, actually the boundary between the two, the foreign language learning and the translation training, is becoming very ambiguous or the blur. So that's the actual historical background. So what is exactly difference? Foreign language learning versus translation training. Here's some summaries. Pedagogical translation, or the foreign language learning, emphasizes that translation is a tool for improving language proficiency. Then translation is information about the language learner's level of language proficiency. So the audience in the classroom is the language teachers or the examiners. So when teachers use translation in the foreign language learning, translation is just a tool and it's not real translation. However, at the translation training environment, the translated text is not a tool, but the very goal of the process. The translation is also information about reality contained in the source text. And we have to really careful with the audience. The target audience is the target language reader waiting some information about reality. But still, I would say the difference between the two is very ambiguous, I would say. It's clear, but it's becoming ambiguous. That's what I wanted to say. Anthony Payne, back in 1992, this explanation is very clear between the foreign language learning and the translation training. He said, the interesting division of errors made by students into binary and non-binary ones. So the foreign language learnings focus on binary errors. Those are that elicit the teacher's answer. It is wrong. Your sentence is wrong in terms of grammar, spelling, or the language rules. And that should be subject to a very quick correction. So that's the foreign language learning. The answer is very clear. It's a binary errors they focus. On the other hand, in the translator training, that we focus on the non-binary errors that require further discussion, explanation, and elaborations. These are the items provoking the answer that your sentence, your translation does not sound good, which is obviously need a further analysis. So that's translation training. So I think this definition is very clearly explains the difference. Anthony Payne continues with this. So in translation training, the acquisition of translation competence is understood as the union of two skills. One is the ability to generate a target text series of more than one viable term for a source text. So you have to come up with as many potential translations as possible. Then you have to acquire the ability to select only one target text from this series quickly and with justified confidence, and to propose this translation as a replacement of the source text for a specific purpose and the readers. So I mean, I think this is very clear for the translation training. Okay, so I will summarize this. So difference between foreign language learning and translation training. So the foreign language learning focuses on binary errors, which means the students has to learn grammar, spelling, language rules, and etc. From a translation quality perspective, I would say they are focusing like the accuracy errors. if you want to call it. But in translation training, we focus on binary errors. That doesn't sound right. So we are very conscious of acquiring native-like selections, very fluent, and also the collocations and etc. I would say this is something, that aspect that has to do with the fluency errors in translation quality. So in my definition, translation in language teaching kind of merges these two aspects. So that TILT is translation in language teaching is incorporating those elements you teach in translation training into foreign language teaching. So that's my definition of it. So imagine when you are doing post-editing, or you are teaching post-editing in a translation training class or the foreign language teaching, still the students has to pay attention to both aspects. So they have to correct fluency errors and also the accuracy errors, which means they have to focus on the binary errors and non-binary errors. So that's the concept behind this. So I want to push this TILT concept toward MTILT, machine translation in language teaching. So the basic philosophy are the same, but still I want to apply the machine translation in the language teaching environment. So TILT underlying philosophy, as I said, is that, but also in addition to it, the English EFL, English as a foreign language, students' writing is interfered by their L1. The learners cannot compose in the same way as native speakers. So I guess what I'm getting at is I want to use this methodology to improve students' writing skill in the target language. So EFL learners' writing is not as good as L1 speakers. So L1 and L2 are linked in the mind of EFL learners. And this is something that should be actively explored. And also the ability of multilingual speakers to integrate various language supports and resources in their opinions. What I'm saying is, because their L1 and L2 are linked, and they have a lot of knowledge in their L1. So it's good to have access to their knowledge stored in the L1 than when it comes to writing in L2. So that's the concept. That relates to actually the translanguaging approach. Also, in general, students, EFL learners, reading skill is better than writing skill. So we want to maximize their reading skill when it comes to the writing they have to do. So that's the that's the philosophy behind it. Then I want to apply machine translation in language learning, but also I want to emphasize here that I want to shift the approach from bad model to the good model. Even before 2016, there are a lot of approaches to use MT in foreign language learning. But at that time, they focused on the bad model approach. So what is it? The bad model was the dominant method at that time, before 2016. MT, machine translations output, was considered a bad model. And learning was encouraged by correcting MT errors. So it's kind of negative evidence that students get. So they post-said it, but they focus on the bad parts or the segments that generated in the translation generated from the machine translation. But because after 2016, NMT's translation quality is good. So I think there's an opportunity for students to learn from MT, which I want to call a good model. So in this model, we consider MT output as a good model and learn good expressions from MT. So that's the kind of approach. I'm not saying the bad approach is disappeared. I think there's still bad parts to be corrected, but also we can pay more attention to the good models. We can learn from. Students are motivated to learn from it too. So good model learning method. So you want to compare that. The bad model is the post-editing, but post-editing tend to focus correcting errors in MT. So the learning is minimized in this method. But good model, we want the students to pay attention to good parts in machine translation. So for that method, I would propose MT assisted writing. So what is MT assisted writing? So that's actually the core of MTILT. So what it is this one. Actually, a lot of researchers and teachers already tested this method in their classrooms, and they saw a certain degree of effects in using this method. So we imitated this method, and we conducted some experiments to collect the data. But what it is that first the student, let's imagine we are giving some writing assignments or some kind of exercise in writing. So we provide a topic to the students, and the students are expected to write the essay in L1 first. That helps them to think, what they have to write, and also they can focus on the content of the topic. Then the second stage or the second phase, the students have to write whatever they thought in the first stage in the target language. So we want to call this one is a self-writing. But of course, the students are not allowed to use machine translation in this stage. They have to do their writing on their own. Maybe dictionary lookup is okay, or the web search, but MT should not be allowed in this stage. And the third phase, they can translate their writing in L1 using the machine translation. Then for our experiment, or a lot of teachers actually use the DeepL for the English and language combination, because it's known as almost the best, the high quality machine translation in Japan. So anyway, so the third stage, they can get a MT result translated from their L1. Then fourth phase, students are now do some activities to revise their own writing by referring to the result from they obtained in the third stage. So the MT, so they can actually compare their own writing and MT output. So this revision, what I want to call MT assisted writing. So that, as you said, students may find something good, such as good expressions contained in MT outputs. They can copy it into their writing or something like that. So that's what we expect. But to be safe, I think we should implement the 5 stage, the 5th stage. The instructor should provide some feedback on the final product, or maybe the teachers are encouraged to have those students do some peer work by criticizing the final products, and etc. So anyway, so MT assisted writing activity is something like this. So as I said, a lot of research has done on this topic, and some summary from those previous research. So as a result of MT writing activities, the amount of communication, like the word count, increases when writing in L1, then in L2. Well, you can easily imagine that, right? And also both syntactic and lexical errors are corrected, and the complexity, like semantic lexical complexity, increases. which means their final writing products get sophisticated in these respects. And more modification is made on a vocabulary level than the syntactic level. So this is something that the teacher has to be careful with. I mean, a lot of students tend to correct vocabularies or copy the vocabulary from the MT outputs. So that's a trend. It's all we observe. And learners at the lower L2 proficiency introduces more modifications. We kind of suspect that lower proficiency students do a lot of copy and paste from MT in their final product. I mean, for that, I touch on based on our experiment results. The learners' writing strategies change because now they are allowed to think of their topic in the first language first. So their writing strategy will change a little bit. And also EFL learners are usually better in reading and writing, right, than writing. So has nothing to do, but anyway, so raw MT outputs are rarely used as they are. I mean, so that's if this happens so frequently, we cannot expect a lot of learning effect in this strategy. So that's something that needs further investigation. Then when unsure, students use dictionaries and internet searches. This trend correlates strongly with high L2 proficiency learners. So what the last sentence means is that we expect that if we use this MT assisted writing practice, students rely too much on the machine translations. So they kind of give up on self-writing, then kind of they wait until the fourth phase and they just, get everything from the MT and stuff. But actually students with high proficiency try to use more like the dictionaries and internet searches along with the referring to the MT output, which was really a good thing. So these are the results from the previous research, but to make sure this is really effective, we have carried out some experiments to collect the data and what kind of result we get. So this will be I already spent 15 minutes on this, but this is the start of my second half of the presentation, and those are the evidence. The results are from my master's students, Hayato Tamura-san, and also Yukari Shimizu-san. Thanks to those two people. So what we did was we carried out the experiments with 32 students from Tokyo Keizai University. They are second year college students. Their English proficiency level is CFR A2 to B1 level. So we asked them to all those writing things. So from 1 to 4, we conducted. Then collect writing task data and for the product evaluation. That's Tamura-san's research. And on top of this, we just recruited 8 more students from the same universities and have them do extra tasks. And also we carried out a retrospective interview to hear what they actually thinking when they are doing these activities. So I will share the results. The task, as I said, we just give them instructions. And also the topic for the writing, we selected from the questions that was used for the TOEFL exam, TOEFL writing exam. So something like the students some students prefer lectures in class in which only the teachers speak and blah, blah, blah. So they have to write their essay on these questions. So for our research question for this experiment is, I guess I can come up with two things. One is, does MT-assisted writing really enhance the quality of students' L2 writing as a product, as a final product? And also the second question is this method effective in learning? We have some fear that too many copies and pastes from MT are resolved with those students' activities. Maybe some students don't pay attention. They are not careful in examining the result. So that's why for the second question, we have the questionnaire, retrospective interviews. And for the first questions, we have like 32 students' data. So let's see the result. Before that, how do we evaluate the quality of their final products? So we use two measures. The one is the syntactic complexity, and the second one is the semantic complexities. For this L2SCA, it's a very kind of famous, the indicator was used to measure of the development proficiency in L2 writing studies. And also this indicator used in many other studies, and they found very reliable. So we draw on this method to evaluate the students' writing products for semantic complexity. But also we use the vocab profiler to evaluate their semantic complexity as well. Give you the idea of this. So this L2SCA includes a lot of measures. Some of the example here, like the mean length of clause or the mean length of T units, and etc. What it is like this. So the T unit is almost one clause in this case. So if the student's writing looks like I have a job interview in Tokyo tomorrow, so I have to go there. So it's a 2 units and in one sentence. And the word count is 14 words. So mean length of T unit is calculated in this way. So 14 words divided by 2 T units, which is 7. The number is higher, the more complex the writing is. So anyway, the higher the better. So in this case, the 7. But if the student's writing is like this, has changed like this, I have to go to Tokyo tomorrow because I have a job interview. In this case, there's only one T unit and still the 14 word count. So the mean length of T unit is 14 words divided by 1, and that means it's 14. So it's you can see the improvement from 7 to 14. So that's how it works. But this method has a lot of other the indicators to look at other aspects in the sentence, like the on top of T units, they have dependent clause divided by T and DCT or the CPC and etc. Also like the complex nominals. But just apart from that, the idea is that higher the number, the more sophisticated the writing gets. That's how it is. Before we conducted actual the experiment, we did the pilot test to make sure our assumption are right. We have some literature that investigated the students and also the native speakers, the syntactic complexities. So according to Lu and I, 2015, the college level native speaker of English writes their mean length of T unit is like 17.3. That's the score they get. also mean length of clause is 10. So that this is the level. But compared to this one, the Japanese students of English scores, of course, lower than the native English speakers. It's like a 13 for MLT and 8 for MLC. So given that, we kind of created some writing in Japanese and have them translated by those machine translation, DeepL and Google Translate. And we got the English translation, and they scored like 16.77, and at Google the 15, and also MLC is like close to 9. So these scores are very close to the native writing score. So we expect that if we use this MT assisted writing method for this English learners, when they do their self-writing in the 13 points, if they look at MT outputs, the score will improve somehow, getting closer to the native speakers. So that's the prediction, and that's the mechanism behind this. So also other scores, we observe the same results. So we did carried out our analysis. And the results are like this for MLT and all those. SW is the self-writing. Students have to write on their own. The score is up this. But the translation from DeepL is a DW. That score is the highest, of course. But then they look at this result and revise their self-writing, and their final product is a machine writing, machine translation assisted writing result is this one. So of course, the self-writing, the syntactic complexity is the lowest, but it got higher, of course, because they deferred to MT outputs. And we examined the actual difference. If the difference between the machine translation and their final product is not significantly different in a statistically different, maybe the result, the students just copied everything from the MT. But actually, these three things are different, statistically significant. The difference are proven significantly different. So from these results, of course, we observe a lot of improvements, but at the same time, yes, they did copy and paste a lot, but still we see the students' effort in their final products. For other measures, we see the similar results, similar curve like this. So I think that's the product results. And also the vocabularies we tested. To put it simply, the vocabulary level got higher too. They used very basic 1,000 English vocabularies, but their final product contained some of academic writing vocabularies and so forth. So the result is good. I show you some specific examples like this. So maybe this one. Okay. The student 17s. So his or her, I don't know. Their self-writing was, so if we study with them, we should find a place where we can't talk free. So that was the original writing. But after comparing this one and revise their own writing, the final product is this one. In that case, I think it is necessary to devise a way to study in a place where we can talk free as a library. Well, still it's not grammatically correct, but I think, I mean, I would say it's get better I mean, as far as the scores are concerned, you see a lot of improvements from self-writing to the final products. But if you pay closer attention to what they did, the middle one is the machine translation result from DeepL. So the red parts are the machine translation result, and they actually copy those portions to their final writings. So it's kind of disappointing, even though the score says or the statistics says, I mean, you know, those are different. But actually, if you look at this result qualitatively, qualitatively, yeah, a lot of copy paste are observed. But also it's interesting, you know, in the not only the improvement is not only observed with the syntactic complexities, but also the grammar here. In the original writing, the student did not place any article in front of place, but in the final writing, because he copied, but yeah, in a place was corrected. Another example, that student 20, again, the syntactic score, complexity score improves. But once again, yeah, the red portions are basically copied from the machine translation. So this was kind of a disappointing results. And we want to discuss about this with you. For semantic complexities that we use a vocabulary profilers, as I said, that the scores got improved. But actual example like this, so this is from student 13. I like to better study in solo than with my friends. And maybe this portion was copied, but also you see the final writing, I prefer to study alone rather than with my peers. So those the vocabulary got so little sophisticated in the final products. So those are the basic results from this experiment. And this one shows, so I thought, but when we examined their writings, actually the performance really depends on the students, right? Some students are so lazy, they just do copy and paste and finish the experiment. But some good students try to think more. So this result says, if their first, the word count in the first original writing, I mean, if they write, the students writes a lot in the original writing, we consider those students are better students than others. And their final products, how much increase they get in the final product. You see the negative correlation here, which means the less the students write in the original writing, the more increase you get, which means lazy students got more copy and paste in the final product. The same applies for the syntactic complexity. If students write a lot in the original writing, their syntactic complexity does not increase as much as those who did not write in the original writing. So those are the trend we observe in here. So this is something we also have to keep in mind when we use this MT-assisted writing. Okay, so that's the product result. Then we want to move on to how effective it is, basically what the students are thinking when they are doing this activity. So for this one, as I said, we recruited 8 students and we screen recorded their tasks by using the screen recording technologies on all those tasks. And after all the tasks are finished, we looked at the recorded screen in the final writing, and the interviewer asked questions students, like why you changed these parts, or why you did not change your writing, even though you are looking at the empty outputs and stuff, blah, blah, blah. So we recorded all the students' comments during the interviews, and we transcribe it. Then total, we have 96 segments, sentences. Then each student made 2 or 3 comments for each segment. So total, we have almost 200 comments for each sentence, what they are thinking. Still, we are working on this, but this is a kind of trend. So I use this KH coder technology to cluster what they are thinking in relation to they modified the sentence in the final product, or if the segment was not modified, what they say. So that's the cluster here. So if students modified after they looked at MT, so what are they thinking? So the most frequent words student commented in their interview was like the expressions or the no confidence or the use or don't know or something like that. When they did not modify the final product, they use this added. Well, what it means, I know I'm still working on this slide. When they say expressions, these are the results, what they say. They basically said, okay, the expressions used in MT are better than I thought. So I borrowed the expressions in my writing. So that's what basically they are saying. So it's a copy and a paste, but they thought the MT, the expressions are good, so they used it. So that's the majority of students says. I don't know. You want to say this is the so effectively students are learned from this or not? But also this is the expressions. But also when they say use, they modified it, but they found good expressions in MT, so they use the expressions as they are. So that's why they copy the MT portions into their writings. I don't have a conclusion yet, but I think at least students are thinking something. They recognize something is good in the MT, then they use as they are. The word no or the don't know. Some students are lazy. Yeah, it says I don't know the word realized, but I just used it because I found it in MT output. But except these students, I would say most of them say, yeah, I recognize the want to and would like to are the same meaning, and that's why I know that, so I used it or something like that. So that's, and also the confidence, because they are not confident in the expressions they used in their own original writing, and they found better expressions in MT output, so they used it in their writing. So still working on this. So what I'm saying is when they modify their own writing in the final writing, so those are the thoughts the students in their mind. So confidence expressions, they use it as they are, or they at least they know the expressions, or they did not know it, but the MT expression was better than they thought, or something like that. Well, anyway, so that's what they're thinking. But when the student did not modify their writings, the most frequent words used was this added. What it means is I forgot. Most of the corrections has to do with the grammar related. So part time. So I forgot to put an article A. but after looking at the DeepL, maybe my original writing was right. So I did not add an article. So I confirm my writing was grammatically correct or something like that. But anyway, that's the observations I got. So I'm sorry. So still for this part is still I'm working on this, but I want to conclude my presentation here. So there are two research questions that I'm trying to answer here. The first question is that does MT-assisted writing really enhance the quality of students' L2 writing as a product? And I would say, yeah, as far as those the numbers for that indicates the syntactic and the semantic complexity are concerned, the product quality per se has improved, right? But of course, as a teacher, or because we want to use this and foreign language education, the concern is the effect. Is this method effective in learning? And although we had a fear that students got so lazy and just go around with just copy and paste from MT without careful examination, but as far as we see in the comments, at least some students, well, most of the students do thinking when they are copying it. So I think there's some learning effect is observed, and I still the further investigation is necessary. But I think this is worth doing and also worth to continue this research and this. So I think this is the end of my presentation, and those are the references I used in the. Sorry, I kind of messed up, disorganized toward the end, but I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Masaru, very, very much. I was completely engrossed in listening to your talk, and I have so many questions, from the government's policies to the philosophy to the models, good or bad, and also the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts, of what you did and what other research studies studied the process, the measurements. But I try to be a gracious hostess. I try to restrain myself. I'm going to let our audience ask their questions. So the floor is open for your questions.
Maybe some clarifications are needed. Then let me ask questions.
Well, then we are, I think a question is popping up. So Masaru, can you read it?
Yeah, in what genre does this model work most effective? What does that mean actually? What genre? In what genre?
And what model? We're talking about what you mentioned, the using machine translation in teaching languages, I guess.
Genre of writing? I'm not really clear actually.
I really think probably it's more effective if the person who asks this question, to turn on your mic, preferably to turn on your mic, your video, your camera too, to ask this question in person.
Or I try to answer this one. I guess any kind of topic, yes, generally like normal essays. Yes, basically, yes. Still, I think the model, this approach is intended to be used in a foreign language learning. So as a student have to do a lot of exercise in writing in any kind of topic, right? But I would say any kind of topic, this method will work. If if the class is advanced level, if the class is, let's say that, for example, in a business writing class, still you can implement this method to promote the writing in the business. But also some kind of topic that has to do with, okay, minority issues and all that. If the students are like the beginner or the intermediate students, the student really have to think of the topic, what to write first. In that case, I think, using their own L1 helpful. So let them focus on what to write first, then kind of introduce, converting it into expressed in the target language. So you can actually, the selection of topic is very important depending on what you want to teach, or also what kind of the proficiency of students that you are teaching. Yes. Is text complexity a controlled factor in the study? It's not controlled, but I think that's the aspect that we want to look at. Did I answer the question, or am I misunderstood the question?
I think, Masaru, probably this the colleague was asking about, probably he or she was thinking about, like in the context of a translation, there's a source text. So maybe the question's about, whether compare with different source. Okay, here we go. So whether different source texts, but it doesn't really apply to your experiment, because you were asking students to write a original
their
text.
own is right. So it's not controlled. So that's the thing. So I think for this is like the audience here today is a translator trainers, right, or the translation study scholars. So in that respect, my presentation is not really it's more like for English teachers rather than. I know what you mean actually though. Yeah. Okay. I have one. I see a Jiaxian Zhen. I see
our colleague Jia Qian. Yes.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you, Professor Yamada, for your inspiring talk. I am actually more curious about the negative impact of machine translation on their writing. So can you share with us like more negative impact in addition to too many copying? And I'm also curious, have those students in the retrospective interview report anything negative? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, still, we are still, like I said, in the process of analyzing those data, but I would say like 10 to 20% of the students are kind of lazy. So even though they did not know the expressions using MT output, they just used it for the heck of it, So that's the kind of very negative impact. What I mean by negative impact is that there's no learning effect is observed in with that kind of students. So that's the one negative side of it that I can think of. But also some other researchers are very concerned. One research have conducted a kind of a longitudinal experiment. So they traced like the students learning throughout a couple of years. That result says if you continue doing like learning with MT, the students tend to rely on the MT, then they stop. How can I say it? They cannot think their own. They always have to rely on the technologies. So in terms of, but I think it's debatable, right? Because how do you want to define the language proficiency to begin with, right? In this age of technologies, because I mean, you don't go like the isolated island without dictionary or the technologies, but still you are expected to speak English or the foreign language there. Maybe, of course, the students don't learn did not learn as much as those who learned without technologies, right? But on the other hand, I would say, let's say, okay, what I'm saying is if they take the TOEFL exam, maybe the score will decrease eventually if you continue these methods, right? So that's the negative impact. But on the other hand, in reality, when you grown up, you start working in office in the business industry, there's a very rare chance that you have no dictionary or you have no access to those technologies. So on that perspective, on that regards, I think it's good that students actually learn how to use those technologies effectively. Yeah, and so still the further investigations are necessary to decide the real negative impact of this method. So that's my opinion, I think. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, so the colleague who asked the question, do you want to share what you think?
I am not an expert in language teaching, yeah, but I'm actually curious about critical thinking and creativity, because in my experience in translation studies, I think students' creativity and critical thinking might be impacted because they tend to, well, they tend to copy a lot, and they might not be able to distinguish the errors, and it's very likely that they will introduce new errors into their writing or translation. And on the other hand, because in your case you don't have a source test, but in the case of translation, it's more likely that their translation will be similar, will be more like their wording or phrases will be similar. So I'm thinking whether their creativity will also be impacted. Yeah. I'm not sure how to like measure critical thinking and creativity. Do you have any suggestions, like how can we look at creativity or in their products?
Yeah, from the technological perspective, because the MT heavily rely on the data, the corpus data, or, the bytext source and target, right? And also the probability of specific words, the occurrence or the appearance of the specific words are very low in the data. That words never used in the output of MT, which means there's some unknown words, or it's called unknown words. I mean, some words never appeared in the result of the MT, which means it has some impact on the creativity in writing, right? That if that's what you mean, yes. But on the other hand, I mean, along with this, I mean, I did not really introduce some other aspects of it. So when they are doing the writing in their L1, if we teach them the pre-writing, pre-editing techniques, actually your output from MT depends on how you write in the original text or source text. So if you rephrase it, then you get different results. Actually, the variety has to do with the creativity in translation, if you know what I mean. So yeah. So yeah. On one hand, yes, I know what you mean, because everything is Google Translate results. So it's a very normalized, and and that. But also there's some certain degree of things that you can do by pre-editing of your source text. Yeah, make more creativity happen. Yeah.
Masaru, actually, there's an audience who share their sort of response, to the previous question is referring to your phase one in that learning process, that instructors' feedback or peer review.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The instructor feedback or the peer. So, yeah. So, yeah, one thing that I did not really mention, the meta-linguistic skills, and then also, even though the chart says it, number 5 phase, it's very important for instructors to provide some the feedback or the peer review is all very important. For that activities, I think the very lot of elements from the translator training can be utilized. For example, referring back to non-binary errors, like, okay, your writing does not sound right, even though grammatically right? And how do you evaluate non-binary errors in your writing? When you're talking to students, how do you explain it does not sound right, this part? How do you explain that? How to peer or the others? It's a very philosophical question for instructors, because most of the cases, if you think about it, in translation training, you just practice, and practice makes perfect without explanations. You just continue brushing up on your writing or the translation until it sounds right, until it sounds right? So, so that this is another thing. What I'm saying is, maybe if you cannot really explain about your ambiguous, what I'm saying is, okay, how do translators do to make sure the final translation is right? Sometimes you have to do a lot of research. Your expressions used in a specific genre because you Google the expressions in the target language. Then you compare, okay, this is actually used in this specific field of genre or the industry. Then you feel confident actually your writing or your translation is right? For that person to do it, you need a very good search skill. So search skill is very important in the translator training, but actually this is not really taught in language learning. So what I'm saying is, for this peer review activity, for example, it's good that have the students do a lot of searching during the peer review to make sure their writing is right. I know going moving away from the questions, but I just make up for what I did not really explain.
If may I jump in?
Yeah,
sorry,
sure.
I'm just so antsy about asking this question, which is related to what you just said, about this meta-linguistic, metacognition, and also strategy. Because I think at one point you were talking about using this method and students show improvement in their use of vocabulary and also the complexity in the syntactic structure. I can easily imagine that these learning words, what kind of terms are used in a good piece of writing, is comparatively easier to understand, to learn, to acquire.
Yeah.
But how about syntactic structure? So I don't know whether the fact that the students in your experiment copy and pasted a lot. And I think it was not because they wanted to learn some expressions or terms. It was because the sentence structure, in a way, was pretty beyond them. And then they could judge that, okay, the sentence structure is sophisticated. I just don't know whether, for example, in the instructor's feedback or the peer review, and how students, I can also understand that, there's a difference between the advanced students and beginning students, how the syntactic structure can be learned, can be more effectively instructed.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you have looked into that.
Yeah. I understood your question as something that has to do with the students' target language proficiency, I would say. I mean, right now, like as I introduced the first half of my presentations, the MT output, of course, you as a professional translator, interpreter's perspective, MT is not good at all. But from the student's perspective, MT is way above their proficiency level, right? So syntactic complexity, for most of English learners in Japan, they are not able to analyze the complexity of syntax in the MT outputs. So that's really one issue. So from the technological perspective, what I'm working on right now as a next project is to develop the machine translation that can be customized according to the level of students. For example, like both vocabulary and the syntactic or the grammar rules, if we can make some impose some restrictions on the output generated from the MT, that will help. Stephen Krashen says it's a very classical. I+1 is always the good level, the atmosphere, right? Right now, if we use MT in the language learning, I think it's I+10. That kind of situation we are creating. So it's from, as I said, from a technological perspective, customizable MT is necessary, really. But also for the teacher, for teaching methodology, I think, yeah, of course, when the students, this is the day one when they start learning English, of course, just have them use MT is not a good thing. So, the degree or the percentage the teacher use MT has to minimize, especially in the very early stage of learning. But I think the percentage can increase, and yeah, when their students' proficiency increases. But I know I'm not really answering your questions. Maybe I can give you some specific examples. Maybe I should pull up some. Another technique you can use for peer review is that just give them some topic, the assignments they have to work on. For example, okay, for this peer review, you only pay attention to grammatical errors or something like that. Then they can just focus on that. But maybe another time, you can tell your students to focus on some other aspects than grammars. For example, okay, I always use this example. When in Japanese, I have a cat tongue. It's a very cultural bound expression. I have a cat tongue means I'm not good at eating hot food, right? When you have that sentence translated by MT, the MT just literally translate, I have a cat tongue. Of course, that does not make sense in English, right? But if the students did not know that, they can, because it's grammatically correct. So that maybe some students may use that expression in their writing. But to avoid that, maybe in some specific class, today we only focus on cultural expressions or idioms that are generated from MT or something. Then for that, they can do a lot of a web search to make sure those idioms or the collocations are correct or not. So that's kind of the thing that the instructor have their mind when they have them do the peer reviewing or also the feedback. Did I answer your questions partially?
Oh, yes. I mean, this is perfect. I think it makes so much sense to me. And then almost, even though it's not truly questions, plus one, right? But in a way it is. It's like every single learning cycle has one single goal. And then if the teacher helps the student identify that goal, and then just embed that goal in the exercise, for one round, and they just focus on that goal. I think it's perfect. I can just see that this strategy will work. I wonder whether in your experiment, I know that you're still analyzing your data, whether you differentiated advanced students with lower, capacity students, whether they would come, because I mean, your data did show that some students did think about, what they saw, not just copy and pasting. So I just don't know whether you actually differentiated the different levels of students.
I don't have a clear answer to where to divide or, so I'm still working on it. So that's a very difficult question. It's very critical in a way.
There's you want to read it yourself, Masaru?
Okay, so I'd like to know how you evaluate or control the content of a piece of writing. After all, a good writing needs quality content. Do you take care of the aspect in the phase one? It's a very tough question. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think the experiment or also the presentation that I delivered today focused on more like the grammatical aspect or syntactic complexity, more like sentence by sentence quality, I would say. But the good writing has to have a discourse, right? The essay has to have the introductory paragraph and also the connectedness of the sentence to sentence, that kind of thing. That's another thing. But I guess it's a content of a piece of writing. Yeah. So give them a topic. Then if they want, if we expect the students to write, to discuss their ideas in the manner, such a manner that the academic writing expects or something like that. So that's a very advanced stage. But of course, so but if you think about it, of course, I mean some instructors says the Japanese way of writing are different from the English writing and stuff. But still it's I would insist that writing, thinking of what to write first in the first language and also the second language is very important. So that's where the students can spend a lot of time in the structure of the essay and the stuff. But but still, I don't you think that's kind of advanced thing? It's master students has to learn how to write thesis and stuff. And so do I take care of the aspect in phase one? Yes and no. Sorry.
I think, Masaru, I think the question also has to do with the how students perceive how they'll be evaluated. For example, if they knew that what they're doing will be evaluated as part of their grades and important grades, final grades.
Yeah.
Maybe they will do, this idea probably will prompt them to do a lot more copy and pasting, and it has nothing to do with their ability or they whether they have metacognition or not, just because they'll be evaluated, and that, yeah.
I see. But that relates to what I just kind of said. Okay, so that's teacher's job. Okay, so for this assignment, this certain aspect of your writing will be evaluated or something, right? So for this assignment, you try to, you can still copy and paste from the MT, but as far as collocations are concerned, that will be evaluated very highly for this assignment. Then students still have to a lot of attention to those specific aspects of that. So, they can do copy and paste, but still they have some goals for this assignment. Then that will be clear. If as far as that's shared among teachers and students, I think that will work.
Well, seeing no further questions, I do have another question. Moving completely away from this nuts and bolts of the teaching, I was pretty fascinated by the Japanese government's goal, very specific. I just, for example, that was at the beginning of your presentation, you're talking about the Ministry of Education, I think was the Ministry of Education having this goal to, it was part of preparation for the Olympics. I don't know whether those goals have been fulfilled partially, completely, or so whether they're adjusting their policies accordingly. So do you know whether there's any development?
For as far as human English, education is concerned, I don't think the government will achieve like the 50% of the junior high school graduate acquires the CEFA A1 or A2 level of English proficiency. I don't think it's achieved. But also for machine interpreting for Expo 2025, still I don't know, but that's more realistic than the human English education, I would say. Yeah, so.
Interesting. Well, that shows that, technology development in that aspect has really, really progressed. Pretty amazing.
Yeah. So I think in a couple of years, I think the Japanese government really have to decide whether the English education is compulsory for everyone, So that's the discussion that would go on, would be discussed.
Well, that's major. I think that's really, really major if it does happen, because we're talking about moving away from this continuous trend of English as a lingua franca, and just because the machine translation has developed so much, and it's really hard for me to fathom, that possibility.
Yeah, I see one more question here. So may I ask whether the experiment you just reported was a one-off exercise or a learning activity in a language learning course? I would imagine that if the students know that there is a summative assessment at the end of the course, they would just copy and paste the MT-generated versions. The experiment was actually the one-off, and this activity was done in the course of like the semester class, of course their behavior may have changed, right? but I think that's what I'm heading for. So yeah, in 1 year or so, I will, yeah, pull up. I will have better result on that aspect. Yes.
And I think in a way, Masaru, you have already answered that question because, yeah, when you were answering another question, I think. Can I ask another question? And
Yeah.
I feel pretty intrigued by the fact that, this so-called bad model and a good model. You're talking about, we can explain a bad model as being focusing on error correction. And a good model, on the other hand, focuses on learning good expressions. Does it mean that error analysis, error correction is no longer playing a role in language education?
No, I mean, no, not what should I say? The thing is, okay, put it this way. MT does not make grammar errors anymore. So as far as the grammar error corrections are concerned, you cannot do that with MT, right? So that exercise has to be done separately in a classroom, from using the MT. But in terms of the accuracy, what you want to convey, what you want to say in the original language was translated correctly in the target language. That accuracy error correction still there, right? For them to work on. So still bad model, like the cat tang example is the one. So they still have to pay attention to accuracy error corrections. But so the both aspects, I think, yeah. But I guess, I don't know. Today I gave this lecture, and actually the reactions that I get from you guys are a little different. I still see a lot of vibes that you have so critical, skeptical about MT anyway. So maybe not, I don't know.
Well, not so much for me. I think I'm pretty convinced, and but I just think that probably you mentioned somebody else's longitudinal studies. Probably, for the future, you may anticipate, doing longitudinal studies, because what we observe in a one-shot study may not be, the ultimate answer, right? I mean, we probably need a longitudinal, because language learning is a long process.
Yeah, same applies to post-editing. Yeah, I hear a lot of criticism about if the post-editing, if you continue doing that, the post-editing for the part of the profession, your translation profession, your skill will deteriorate in the long term or something. Yeah, I hear that kind of criticism. That has to be evaluated and also, investigated.
Interesting. I don't see any questions in the chat box. I don't know whether our audience will want to turn on your mic, or you can continue to type your questions into the chat box. Of course, we want to see you, or want to hear your voice. So you can just turn on your mic. That'll be great.
Yeah, I left too much time for discussion. Yeah.
No. Actually, I have more questions.
I can. Maybe I want to share something. Yeah, I was going to do this performance here. This is a pocket talk here, right? So it's a Japan-made device that translate quickly. So if I speak Japanese, that will translate into English. You've seen that. It says, こんにちは。今日話した内容は機械翻訳と英語教育についてでした。
Hello, today we talked about machine translation and English education.
Was she right?
Yeah, it shows in the screen, so you can actually see that here,
amazing.
and also that speaks the language to you. So still, this is sentence by sentence, but this is the quality you can kind of feel. And also, as far as the machine translation technology is concerned, the DeepL is the one that I used for my experience and everything. And I want to introduce this, the functions that the DeepL has. So what I wrote in Japanese, basically the translation is I met my mentor in English. And so when I said that the discrepancy between this output from MT and the student's proficiency are another very serious issue for this MT assisted learning, right? But this DeepL actually has, if the student says, okay, I don't know this word mentor, then they can click on this. And this DeepL gives you some other options to choose from. Then if you just want to mention, if you actually meant it's a teacher, then you can just select teacher. Then the whole sentence will be retranslated. In this case, I just click this, sentence structure does not change. But something like I just wrote some kind of similar excerpt sentence from Kawabata Yasunari's the very famous novel, the トンネルを抜けるとそこは雪国だった。When I went through the tunnel, I found myself in a snow country. I mean, this is very good translation, actually very similar to actual translation of his novel. But sometimes this is too fancy or something. Again, you don't want to use the word found, or you just wanted to say, okay, I want to use the word came, then you select it. The whole sentence will be retranslated like this. So what I'm saying is this feature is the one that I was saying. It's kind of customizable MT according to the student's proficiency, because when even in a good model, if students expect different English expressions or sentence structures, then the machine translations is so different from what they thought, the learning effect is minimized. But by using these features, they can get this English translation as close to as what they thought, or maybe the close to their English proficiency and so forth. So I think this is very the very handy feature that I think this is very useful for this kind of learning. So that's one thing I just wanted to share. Okay, so I hear a hand from Janice.
Hi, Yamada-san.
Hi.
Hi, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. I have a question in relevance to the national agenda, again, relating to the implementation of machine interpreting. There are 2 stages to go, right? One of those, if you could return to that slide, please. I don't remember the exact term used there, but I wonder what may be the major obstacles for each of the stages to be achieved as far as machine interpreting is concerned, especially if we're thinking about moving towards a fully functional machine interpreting service for business settings. What might be lacking there? Yeah, for 2025, which is very close, The goal
Yeah.
is for machine interpreting to complement context and speaker's intention. So what do you think, what kind of data do you think can contribute to this complementary function or element of contextual and the speaker intention information to make machine interpreting more human-like to some extent? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, what do you think, actually?
Well, we are actually, I'm talking with some of my colleagues from computer science recently, and we were talking about, from computer-assisted interpreting to fully functional AI interpreting. The major obstacle may lie in the communication of real intention, the understanding of people's intention, especially people who are communicating with each other. So that is the aspect the machine may not be able to. I mean, of course, there are a lot of advancements in the field of AI, machine learning. Yes, like you projected here, artwork produced by machine. But yeah, my guessing is that the interactional part, like for example, how to make the right choices, as far as communication intention is concerned, can still be one of the aspects that machines still need to improve. And that's the reason why we may need to provide quality data or more complicated data, especially as far as community interpreting is concerned, because that gives more complex settings for machine to consider. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to it. It's just
I know what you mean. So I mean, 2025 is too soon to achieve that. The machine can read the speaker's intention and all. But the one possibility is that I see is that multimodal learning. Right now, any kinds of machine translation is text-based learning. That the data is still text, whether or not it's a sentence or the passage or the documents. Still all the learning is from the text data, anyways. Even for the interpreting, it's still text, like oral speech data, still text speech only. So that's the learning. The device, but the multimodal learning means we can add more data for the machine to learn. For example, this is one example I always show. This is the mantra. The mantra is manga translation. It's a kind of scanlation technologies. This mantra train the machine translation engine dedicated to translate those manga translations. But this the learning is not only done on the basis of text learning, but also the characters here in the box, they also learn with this text. What it means is, okay, let's say this character is a girl, teenage girl, then English expressions generated from this engine is that take two aspects into consideration. One is the text data, also these are face expressions or the appearance of this data. So the result you get is something like the teenage girl would say in English. So those are the things that are considered. So I think right now, today's lecture is videotaped, and we have the motion picture data with the textual data. Then if we give them to the machine learning, maybe they can they can learn the way the Japanese people say this thing. Actually, it's lying because my facial expression, my intention is different, but what I said is this or that. So I think, I think so the multimodal learning can actually tell speaker's intention when they are generating output. So that's the one possibility I see. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. So about the 2025 goal, which seems to be difficult to achieve at the moment, do you think it's good news for to our students? I mean, what kind of message should we convey to our students if this 2020?
We can wait until 2030. We still have a job. I don't know.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, I don't think we have more questions in the chat box. And it is 9 o'clock and 1 minute after 9. It is your past 10.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? And we're really, really grateful, for you giving us this time, after a long returning from a long international trip. And definitely you're not showing any sign of jet lag. But thank you very much, Masaru. And I personally truly enjoyed this talk. So again, I would like to remind our audience, if you're interested in any more activities organized by the Center for Translation, you can write to us and provide us with your name, and then we can put you in the mailing list. And well, thank you very much again, Masaru. Yeah. And I hope that, before too long, we're going to read about the results of your study. Looking forward to that.
And thank you for inviting me. And and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Okay, good night, everybody. Wherever you are. And then we're going to stay for like 5 seconds in case you want to type in. We see a lot of messages of appreciation coming in. Otherwise, we'll log off after 10 seconds or so. Thank you.